Let us not forget everything that happens. It's by the will of Allah. Holy will. It's time to unite and stand, and we will be the best amongst men. It's not time to be extreme or a duty unthinkable, but to stand together as one. Tune into Sunnahfollowers, stream it every day, various platforms. Trust me, you'll find a way. Sunnahfollowers.
Hayyakumullah. Welcome, brothers and sisters. So, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to just try to just go straight into it, bidnillah, because there is not a lot of time that I have today. And, yeah, so let's do it, inshallah. Okay. So, we're going to start with Tawheed, Aqidah, from the book Ma'arij al-Qabul, or Mukhtasar Ma'arij al-Qabul. And we were talking about the benefits of Tawheed, right? The benefits of the Shahada. The benefits of the Shahada. And we covered two benefits, so now we're going to go on to the third, bidnillah ta'ala. It says here, وَهِيَ الْعَهْدُ الَّذِي ذَكَرَهُ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ إِذْ يَقُولُ لَا يَمْلِكُونَ الشَّفَاعَةَ إِلَّا مَنِ اتَّخَذَ عِنْدَ الرَّحْمَنِ أَهْدًا. So, the Shahada is the ahd, the promise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions when he said in Surah Al-Layl, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, and they do not own the intercession, the shafa'ah, except he who has taken Ar-Rahman as or taken a promise, Ar-Rahman, taken a promise with Ar-Rahman. Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, he says about this, هو شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وبراءة من الحول والقوة إلا بالله وأن لا يرجو إلا الله عز وجل. So Ibn Abbas explains this verse here by saying it is the testimony that there's no deity worthy of worship but Allah, and to be far removed from there being any might or power except through Allah Azza wa Jal, and that someone does not hope for other than Allah, or don't put their hope in other than Allah. Another benefit of the Shahada, it is وَهِيَ الْحُسْنَى الَّتِي ذَكَرَهَا اللَّهُ تَعَالَى فِي قَوْلِهِ فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. قاله أبو عبد الرحمن السلمي وضحاك ورواه عطية عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما. So the Shahada, according to some of the scholars that were just mentioned, or who were just mentioned, is the Husna, or the great good, or yeah, I guess that's the best way to say, best way to translate it. At least that's the best way I can think of right now. So and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned or was referring to when he says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى, as for he who gives and fears, right? He has fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى, and he attests to that which is the husna, which is the good. So we will make easy for him the yusra, that which is easy. So here, al-husna, that thing that he has to attest to, the thing he has to verify and validate, and says that it is the truth, it is the shahada. And that is what will reward that person with ease. So that is it, the two benefits that we're going to cover for today of the shahada. Any questions as far as that's concerned? Let me put this on in case any questions from the folks at Zoom. Hold on a little bit. Okay, yes, what's your question? Okay. Okay, so since there aren't any questions, we'll move on, inshallah ta'ala, to the next part of the class, which is the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. And correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe we are on the 37th hadith. I'm not sure, you know, I didn't get to do a lot of prep for this class. So I'm going off hadith today. And if we skip some, we'll go back with Nilai Ta'ala. Because this is really far ahead. We only have 3 more hadiths to go. So I can't believe that we're this close to the end of the 40 hadiths. So anyway, the hadith, this hadith is the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qala, inna Allah tajawaza li an ummati al-khata'a wa nisyan wa mastukrihu alayh. Hadithun hasan rawahu Ibn Majah wal Bayhaqi wa ghayruhuma. Okay, so this is the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma. He said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that verily Allah has overlooked from my people, from my followers, from my nation, al-khata, which is what someone does by mistake, right? Well, nisyan, and nisyan is what you do out of forgetfulness, or that you forget. Forgetting is a mistake, right? وَمَسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ, and that which they are compelled to do. That means that's which they're forced to do, right? And this hadith is considered hasan, you know, sound by recorded by Ibn Majah and Bayhaqi, and other than them. Okay, so what are the benefits of this hadith? One of the benefits is sa'atu rahmatillah. It shows the vastness of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa fadluhu wa ihsanuhu ila ibadihi, and how he does good for and to his servants. Haythu rafa'a anhum al-itham fi hadhihi al-ashya, because he has removed from them being sinful when these 3 conditions happen. The other أخذت على الخطأ فإن كان الخطأ في ترك واجب فعله. So also, specifically, we're talking about when we talk about not being responsible for mistakes, right? The Sheikh here, he mentions that if we do a mistake in an obligation, for example, you left something out that is obligatory, then and you left out that obligation out of a mistake, whether it's forgetfulness or just mistake, then you're able to go back and correct that by doing that obligation. وإن كان فإتلاف حق لغيره ضمنه. And that is because in this specific instance, if you're not able to, rectify or come with that obligation due to a mistake, then you're forgiven for it. You are forgiven for it if it is something, of course, when we talk about obligation, we talk about obligation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The rights that we owe Allah Jalla fi'ula. As far as, rights of the Adamite, then that is a different story. Rights of the people, that is a different story. Because the right of forgiving is in their hands. The right of forgiving is in their hands. Any questions on that?
We have a question, brother. It's from Brother Ibrahim in Twitch. I'm not for sure if it's the hadith that you just mentioned now or or what you did before. But his question is this the hadith that excuses us from bad thoughts?
No. That hadith, I think it's a hadith we covered before, is when it says, "Man hamma bi sayyi'atin falam ya'malha." The person who thinks about doing something that is bad and doesn't do it, then he gets a reward as if I'm sorry, no, he gets the reward of one good deed. He gets the reward of one good deed if he thinks of doing something bad and doesn't do it. So that's a different hadith as opposed to this one. But khata and nisyan is not the same as well. Khata, meaning, making a mistake or forgetting, is not the same as making the intention, like, you have in your mind that you're going to leave off doing this bad deed or the sin because it is pleasing to Allah Jalla fil Ula. Any other questions?
Not so far. I don't see any.
Okay. Wa alaikum assalam wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so let's continue then, inshallah ta'ala. Subhanallah. I don't believe we're going to be, if everything is correct and we're moving according to haven't skipped any hadith, we're going to be done with the 40 hadith real soon. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So when we're going to talk about right now, we're going to go over Seerah. And speaking about Seerah, we're just going to cover one line. We know that we've gotten to the part where the Prophet ﷺ is in Medina. We got into the part where he did the mu'akha, right? He did the brotherhood between the Ansar and the Muhajirin, the people who migrated to Mecca, and the people who are natives. I'm sorry, yeah, natives of Medina. The people who migrated from Mecca and the people who are native of Medina made them brothers. And we also know that during this time too is when the battle started between the Muslims. So here the Shaykh, he goes on to say, وَالْغَزْوَةُ الْكُبْرَى الَّتِي بِبَدْرِ فِي الصَّوْمِ فِي الصَّوْمِ فِي سَابِعِ عَشْرِ الشَّهْرِ. So now the Shaykh is mentioning that in the 7th month, hold on, 7th month, في سابع عشر الشهر. لحظة. Oh, okay, nah, okay. I thought I was understanding. I'm sorry. Okay, so in the 17th of Ramadan, the 17th of Ramadan is when the Muslims had one of their biggest battle. And this is considered the first of their biggest battle. And who knows what battle that is? The biggest battle, one of the biggest battles, and it's the first of them. We know that there's several big battles that happen among the Muslims. Which one is this? Yeah. Okay, what do you say? Saying it wrong, I think. Anyone else has a guess?
Muhtar
The
said
first.
Badr.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Muhtar said Badr.
Yes, Badr. Now, Badr is the first major battle that the Muslims had. Now, so and that happened when in Ramadan, the month of fasting, and considered the 17th, right? Asabi Ashur, the 17th of the month of Ramadan. And we'll, okay, stop right there. Okay, so the last thing now we're going to cover now. Well, are there any questions? I think our class in Tariq, you know, or when we talk about Seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu wasallam alayhi, the text that we are coming from is pretty straightforward. It doesn't really deal with anything that there's a lot of ikhtilafat or difference of opinion in. So I don't really think that we'll have a lot of questions and a lot of the things that we cover in that section. But if there are any questions in regards to that, go ahead, tafaddalu. If not, we'll go straight to our last subject, which is dealing with marriage, inshallah ta'ala.
No questions from Zoom.
Okay. All right. So, Bismillah. Now, if you guys remember, and I've been going a little bit back and forth when it comes to the topics, the type of topics that we cover in this specific um, area, and we've touched. We said the 5 rulings are creation, which is encouraged, also known as masnoon as well. And then there is mubah, which is neither that or that, just allowed basically. And then we have makruh, which is disliked, and we have haram or muharram, which is impermissible. So we've covered the first 3, right? Does anyone want to give me an example of when marriage is considered? When is it? That's actually the next one. So if you have the ability to do so, it's not one of the reason why it would be obligatory to get married. Yes. Okay. So anyone else?
We have an answer on Zoom.
Go ahead.
Sexual desire.
Yeah, but to what extent, right? Sexual desire to the extent that you feel that you will fall into haram. Yes, there you go. Khadija got it right. When you have uncontrollable desires, right? Desires that cannot be controlled, that's when it's obligatory. Okay, so now that we've covered, we did a little bit of review. Now let's get into the issue of makruh. When is it disliked to get married? So let's see what the scholars say here. It says, قال الحنفية يكون النكاح مكروها أي تحريما لخوف الجور فإن تعارض خوف الوقوع في الزنا لو لم يتزوج والخوف الجور لم تزوج قدم الثاني. Okay, so the Imam Abu Hanifa and those that follow his school of thought, they're categorizing of different issues are not the same as the other scholars. So makruh sometimes to them, and this is why you have to be very careful and understand the terminology of the scholars. Now, when we study the books of the scholars, one of the gharad, right? One of the objectives of studying the books of the scholars is to familiarize ourselves with their terminology, right? So when it comes to the Hanafis, what we consider to be makruh or disliked is basically something that's haram, but there is no specific text to state it's haram. What do I mean by that? They are very particular when it comes to using the terminology of the word haram. And they believe that this is reserved only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sure, or clarifying that it's not something that there's text from Allah saying that's haram, then you can use the word makruh, right? It's dislike. What would be translated as dislike? All right, so what's understood here is that they're talking about it being haram. Like, when is it impermissible to not get married? Now here they say that it is impermissible if there's going to be oppression. It is impermissible for an individual to marry if them marrying this individual is going to cause oppression on them. Knowingly, of course, obviously knowingly, because we know we all unknowingly might oppress someone. Now, so they say this, and then they also give a scenario. What if you have two issues going on? And I kind of touched on this in one of our classes. Someone who needs to get married due to uncontrollable desires, right? They can't control themselves. But if they get married, they will end up oppressing that person. Okay, example, there's a sister that wants to get married. But for whatever reason, she knows that, or maybe she doesn't know, maybe she's unaware of, but maybe she's heard that, she tends to oppress her spouse in a certain category or in a certain issue. And this could be, of course, likewise, if it was a man, just flip everything around, the names and gender and all that. The Hanafis, they say in a scenario like this, you have to put the likelihood of oppression before the issue of falling into haram, right? Through zina and so for that. Why is oppression is something now that's connecting to the slave of Allah, right? Oppression is connecting to the slave of Allah. And of course, we just covered about, when things are connected to the servant of Allah, there's different rulings for it. When it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's easy for him to overlook his rights, right? That he has over you. But when it comes to the rights of the ibad, of the other servants, then it's an issue, right? Because now you're going into a situation that is now more, it extends past yourself, right? It extends past yourself. And because of that, the Hanafis, they say it is not permissible. See, some folks is saying some stuff here. Let me see what we got here. Naam, inshallah. Wa iyaakum, akhi Ivan. And you too as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Okay. So that's with the Hanafis and stuff. Okay, now let's go to the Malikis. What do they say? And this is where you're going to see a lot of differences too as well. I want you to pay attention that even though they all agreed when it was obligatory, and pretty much they agreed when it was disliked, when it was encouraged, but look at how they disagree about when it is discouraged as far as the examples. Now I want you to think about whether or not, do they really disagree, or are they approaching the issue from just different angles? So here's what the Malikis say. They say, يُقْرَأ نِكَاحِ لمن لا يشتهي ويقطعه عن عبادة غير واجب. Now, the Malikis, they have a very interesting take on this. They say it is disliked for an individual to get married if he doesn't have the desire for marriage, and being married will take him away from doing worship that is not obligatory. Like fasting, for example, or maybe making Hajj, or maybe even something like ta'akhi, being the brotherhood and stuff like that. If he doesn't have that desire, right? Keep that in mind. So a lot of brothers might say, well, I got to get married and things like that, even though they don't desire to get married. And if it is pushed to them, like, well, what about the reward, akhi? There's other ways you can get the reward. There are other ways you can get the reward if you have no desire for marriage. All right? So think about that. All right. So that's the Malikiyah. Now, what is the Shafi'iyya says, Imam Shafi'i and his school of thought? Says, من لم يحتاج لنكاح بأن لم تتقي نفسه له من أصل الخلقة أو لعارض. Basically, here the Shafi'iyya, they're saying that, basically, that he has no desire for marriage due to him naturally being like that. Like he naturally has low, I guess you could say, if it's a man, testosterone or whatever like that, he has no innate desire for what, for the major or the big part of being a relationship. Right? That's not there. Or he has some other type of deficiency which prevents him from being able to fulfill some of the needs of a partner, he or she, right? He or she. And this can go both ways. So if that individual has no desire, or they have some type of deficiency which prevents them from fulfilling some of the roles of marriage, then it is disliked. Okay. So now let's move on to the Hanabila. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and his followers, what do they say? Of course, this is only one opinion that they have. If somebody has no desire, then he shouldn't get married. Once again, we see some similarities there with some of the statements of the other scholars. But they also mentioned too as well that it's disliked for an individual to get married to a person, and this is talking about a man now, get married to a sister just to prevent her from marrying someone else. Is this like for an individual, a man, to marry a sister just to keep her bound to him, keep her tied to him, basically? That is dislike. And also they mentioned the issue too as well, that if he has no desire or he's not able to fulfill the obligations of marriage, and also he or she, this will also be of course for male and female, he or she does not have the obligation or have the ability to fulfill the obligations of marriage, and also being married will keep them away from their ibadah, and seeking knowledge, right? So in this case, and we're talking about your optional ibadah, like we've been before, right? So it keeps you away from your worship and seeking knowledge. Then it is disliked in this sense, and that's it. So we went over all 4 school of thoughts. Any questions on that? So what did we get from that, brothers and sisters? Like, we do the scholars, they agree on the issue of when is this like, or is there a little bit of variance in there? What did you notice from the statements of the 4 school of thoughts in this issue? In essence, the majority of them are saying the same thing, right?
We have a question here, brother.
Yeah, go ahead.
What was the Salafi opinion again?
Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm sorry, whose opinion?
Salafi?
Which one? We mentioned Imam Malik, Imam Ahmed, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Abu Hanifa. Which one of the Salaf's opinion are you talking about now?
I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's Shafi.
I think Shafi'i is what they're probably trying to say.
Yes, I believe so. I don't know how to spell it, so I don't know how to pronounce it. So he said yes.
Okay, so Imam Shafi'i and his school of thought, they pretty much say that it's dislike if you have some inability to perform your duties, basically. So this goes on. This goes basically. This is in line with the other opinions. Any other questions? This is the last thing we're covering, inshallah ta'ala. So next class we'll try to cover when it's haram, when it's impermissible. We'll cover that next class. Is another question? Tafadhal.
Yes. So women should not marry men in prison? That's a question.
An individual in prison is not able to fulfill the certain obligation, and so it's disliked in that scenario and stuff like that. He's not able to fulfill some of those obligations, so because of that, and there's also a hint of oppression too as well. Depending on how on the type of situation and things like that. That's not something that's advised, nor do I understand how that's even a question that one would ask themselves. I understand that there's a lot of brothers that do end up going to prison or accepting Islam in prison. And I understand from their side, from their point of view, being lonely, still having the desire for companionship, especially in a situation like that. But what I do not understand is why a sister would even put that on her radar as an option. If he's getting out in maybe a couple weeks, or maybe, in a scenario where she's not really looking for something right now, but she would like to meet a brother that's good, and she doesn't mind the wait, as long as it's a good brother and stuff like that. I can see that. But then the question that arises to me is, are there not good brothers that are not locked up? That, what I'm saying? So I really have difficulty understanding in what scenario that will be a viable option for sisters. I just don't understand. And as for the brothers that are in prison, that they have that ijtihad, they have that desire for companionship and things like that. Don't talk yourself into a scenario that you know that you cannot handle. And this is an advice for me too. This is general advice, and we're us as brothers, us as men, we have the ability to do this. I think women do too, to some extent. But when it comes to the issue of marriage, brothers be convincing themselves of things that they know they're not up to, and things like that, and thinking that seeing things through rose-colored glasses, as they say, and that everything is gonna work out, and I'm gonna be out of this scenario soon. Maybe he thinks like a brother, for example. Let me give you an example. A brother be in prison, and he's gonna build his whole marriage on the fact that he might get a parole. That's an example. So just that little glimpse of hope, he's gonna build everything on that. So now he's gonna talking to the sisters, Joaquin, making sure he has that lined up. Okay, his probation hearing, such and such a date. So he might be out in 2 months after that. I don't know how that stuff works, but it might be out a little bit after that. So, he's talking to the Wakil, talking about yeah, I'm going to be, and stuff like that. And it's like, subhanAllah, we have to stop doing that. We have to stop doing that and be more grounded in the now and our situation now, and understand what we can do now, and use that to dictate how we move and how we go about things. Okay, so the sister of Wafa said they might not consider him high value. I don't know in what context that's referring to. Is it talking about the person, the sister, that she might not be high value, or the brother in prison might not be high value? I don't know. But the value of a person is there's an am wal khas, like in usul al-fiqh, right? When we talk about the fundamentals of Islamic jurisprudence, there's issues that's pertaining to the am, the general, and there's issues that's pertaining to the khas, right? The specific. When we talk about value, there is a general value of certain things, and there's a specific value. Specific value can change depending on the individual, right? And then there's a general value which certain people are excluded from. And the issue with that, for example, the believers, as Muslims, we all have value. Right? In general, as Muslims, we all have value. But even with that, what did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said? Said, "A Muslimul qawi khayrun wa habbu inda Allahi min al Muslim al da'if wa fi kullin khayr." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the Muslim or the mu'min. I'm sorry, no, the Muslim. I'm sorry, not Muslim. The mu'min. Yes, he said mu'min. The believer that is strong is better and more endearing to Allah than the Muslim that is weak. Let me say that again. The Muslim that is strong, the mu'min, the believer that is strong, is more beloved and better than the Muslim that is weak. But they're both mu'min, right? They're both believers, and both of them is good. And the Prophet said in this hadith, wa fi kullin khayr, and in both of them, in both scenario, in both situation, is good. But even with that, even with something that both having good in it, there is darajat, there are levels. And we stated this before. So when we talk about a value, the value of a believer that is strong is higher than the value of a believer that's weak. Right. We understand that. The Prophet ﷺ has given us that metric to measure that by. So similar, every individual, there's going to be metrics in which they are measured, whether it is Islamic metric or whether it is something outside of that. And the people are going to gauge them depending on that. Right? And even with all of that being said, let's say in general, you don't meet a certain metric, it does not mean that there is no good in you or no one will find value in you or something like that, right? So a sister who wants to get married and no one is really trying to, no one is really approaching her. First of all, if that's the scenario, if that's the situation that nobody's approaching her, then maybe she should try approaching an individual that she finds appropriate for her, which is permissible according to the majority of the scholars because of what happened with the Prophet ﷺ and that sister, right? The one that stood up and said that she wanted to marry him, and whatnot. The Prophet ﷺ handled that in the way that he handled it, and she ended up marrying another brother by directions of the Prophet ﷺ. So that could be one of the things, and I know a lot of sisters are hesitant in that. That's why I'm bringing it up. We have the proof from the Sunnah that it's okay. It was done during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So that's one thing. The thing is when we talk about a sister who's not able to get response from brothers, and this is, let's be, how do you say? Let's be real with one another. It is very rare that a sister does not elicit any type of engagement from the opposite sex. It is very rare. This is something that does not happen often. Most sisters, they do elicit some type of response. The issue is that the people that respond to her are not the people that she is or wants to engage with. Okay, so that right there might be an issue that needs to be addressed, because you can't say, why doesn't anyone want to marry me, when there are people who want to marry you, but the issue is you don't want to marry them. Ask yourself, why is it that you don't want to marry them? Is it only an issue of attraction, like physical attraction? Is it only an issue of maybe financial attraction? Like, what is the reason why? If this is your case, if this is your scenario, right? If this is not your scenario, right? Let's say then you're a sister that these two scenarios it doesn't apply to. No brother is checking for you, and whether you like him or going on. Going to a brother in prison is still not the best of ideas, because their situation is not normal. The likelihood of you finding a partner of value, which what I mean by value, that's someone who, now remember, brothers and sisters, we're talking about scenarios in which even without the issue of prison, it's hard to find a partner. A good partner. It's hard to find a good partner out there just in general. So now you're putting on top of that the issue of prison, where a brother is in there he is hungry, starving for attention, especially from the opposite sex. Probably willing to say almost anything to generate that attention. And you believe that you can, get a successful marriage and interact of that scenario the majority of the time? I don't know. I think it's better for you to probably look into those brothers that might not be the ones that you prefer marrying. Okay, the Imam Mutawaf, he says, what about a brother being an imam in prison for an outside community? Okay, he's an imam. Okay, so an imam in prison, that means he's in prison and he's an imam. That doesn't work. An individual cannot be in a leadership position. The people that he's leading, their condition is better than his. He basically has no freedom. Yet, how is he expected to lead? He has an inability. And when a leader has an inability or something that prevents him from leading, he gives the leadership to those who are able to carry out all that that position entails. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. Especially especially when we talk about prison, we're talking about someone is over you, governing your do's and your don'ts. What if your community needs an urgent response from you in a scenario? Yo, Imam, so and so has this issue, and we need some direction from you ASAP. How do you get clarity from the Imam, who's supposed to be the leader of the community when the time comes? And if you say, well, in a situation like that, he could delegate the responsibility to somebody else. Okay, if in that situation you delegate the responsibility to somebody else, why not just delegate the position to someone else? Why? What is the reason for holding on to that position? What is the benefit of it for the community? Are you like that dude so much that only you alone can lead the community? That if anybody else was to take that position, everything goes to shambles? That speaks volumes to a certain extent. And Allah Ta'ala, may Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala make us of those who look out for that which pleases Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala in all our affairs. Ameen, ameen. Are there any other questions?
Yes, we have a question off of Facebook. The question is, can a woman whose husband is doing long time in prison, can she divorce? Can she divorce, or is the marriage annulled?
Okay, so no scenario can a woman divorce. Let me repeat the question. A sister who's married to somebody in prison, she wants to know whether or not she can divorce the brother or get the marriage annulled. So divorce, in no scenario can a woman divorce anyone, right? Divorce is something that's in the hand of the husband. Now, what the sister can do is request. There's a couple steps that we like to take in this type of scenario. The first thing in this type of scenario, where you have a sister who wants to get out of a situation that she's in, right? We're speaking whether it's being married to a person in prison or a bad husband or whatever the case may be. The first thing that she wants to do is go to the imam of the community and tell him the situation. What he's going to do, if he's smart and if he's just, he's going to want to hear both sides, right? You can't make a claim with only half of the picture. And he's going to want to investigate. That's the first thing that he does. If he finds her claims to be true, the next step that he's going to do is try to convince the brother to divorce her. Like, okay, you don't want this trouble. The sister's obviously, she's not happy. You know, the best thing is just let her go on her way and stuff like that. There are others that will look at that and be like, no, I'm not, I'm going to be stubborn on this. And sometimes on the outside looking in, you might think to yourself, what is wrong with this brother? Why doesn't he want to divorce this sister and stuff like that? And this is something that I always ponder about, because I can't see any real man wanting to be with a sister that doesn't want to be with him. The only scenario I see that happening is if he believes that she's just fucking, one of the words that someone, you know, one of the slang terms, means that she's just acting up. Right? And he believes that being patient with her in the long run, she'll simmer down and, you know, start acting right. And he might know his situation better than the individual that's on the outside looking in, like the imam. So sometimes that might be it, or sometimes it just might be one of them dudes that just really clingy and just doesn't want to let anybody have what he has had. Right? He considers the sister his possession now. If the imam can clarify that that is the case, that this brother is just being stubborn for no reason, and that the sisters, her claims are just, then he can do what's called a fasq, which is an annulment of the marriage. This is not something that's done easily. Like a imam or anyone that's in charge, a scholar, whatever, they don't go to that with ease. And I know that it might be frustrating for some sisters that just want a bad situation to be done with, right? You want to move on with your life. You made a mistake. You married this guy thinking that he was this or that, whatever the case may be. And now you just need to be free. Remember, once again, we went over this issue more than once in our class. The rights of the people is not something that you just willy-nilly with. You can't just, you know, one and done type of thing. You have to be certain. And then when you're certain, you have to be certain. Until there is almost no doubt in your mind. Because what you are about to do, what the imam is about to do, is possibly take away the right of that individual. So because of that, it's not something that's done lightly. So I with all sympathy, I want sisters to understand that, right? It's not something that we can do easily. And that weight is something that we have to carry. We're responsible for that, right? Whoever is the leader of the community, not saying me personally, but you understand. So because of that, we don't we drag our feet somewhat. And some people, and now this is where it's wrong, some people will almost never use that as an out. They'll tell you to go back to the other, be patient, you know, while he hit you upside of your head, you know, blood bleeding everywhere. I don't know what happens in certain scenarios and situations. I'm just putting that out there, that might be a sister's situation. She wants to be in compliance with what she feels is the command of Allah. And she's looking to you for that guidance. And you instead, because of fear or whatever it is, instead of doing or taking that step that needs to be taken, you telling her, you putting all the responsibility back on her. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. All right, and hopefully that answers the sister's question. Did I answer that? Yeah, I think I did. So yeah, so she would have to get an annulment, but it's not an easy issue. Any other questions?
No more questions on Zoom.
Okay. And I don't see any question here on YouTube as well. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Okay, so all right, we spoke about the issue about prison and the sister that being her only option. We did that. Okay. Okay, so that seems like that's it. So with that, then we'll close off by saying Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Leave the top right there, yeah.